So it looks like we're getting a new wave of Marvel Legends 3 3/4 inch action figures, and as usual, they're awful. But are any of these worth your money? Be sure you stick around until the end, soulmates, because we're going to talk about what characters we'd like to see in this line next. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. Continuing the trend of the last wave of Marvel Legends 3 3/4, we now have 4 new characters, sort of. First up is Richard Rider Nova. And this one is one of the less offensive action figures in the wave, just because they managed to get his details right for the most part. But as always, getting by on the bare minimum and just getting the details right does not a good action figure make. I say that because this character has elements on him that should definitely be sculpted on. His shoulder pads, for instance, they extend out from his shoulders. Those should definitely be sculpted on and not painted on like they are here. Besides that, another thing that should be sculpted on him are his gauntlets, because those are always pictured as metal bands around his forearms, and they're raised up in the comics, so they should be raised up here. One place that does have a sculpted element, weirdly enough, is the belt buckle. And the weird thing about that is that Nova doesn't have a belt buckle in the original comics. It used to be typically portrayed as just a band around his waist, but here we see the belt buckle because they're recycling Captain America's body yet again. Much to my surprise, they didn't portray Nova with a belt buckle on the box art, because when they recycle these things for these action figures, that's usually what they do, is they revise the box art so it looks more like what they did on the action figure, even if it isn't accurate to what actually appeared in the comics. Next up is Firestar, and what's the first thing I notice on this one? Why, it's go-go boots yet again. My god, every single woman in this line has go-go boots. That is depressing, and it's sexist, but moving on, at least she has a new head sculpt. Her head sculpt is kinda goofy looking, the smile doesn't feel like it really works on this one, and the mask is something that they pulled from the comics, so obviously they're not doing the Spider-Man and his amazing friends version of Firestar. Something that I notice about the mask is that it has this orange ring around the eyes, and I'm trying to figure out, is that supposed to be the color of her face? Or are they supposed to be glowing? I'm thinking it's supposed to be the color of her face, and if that is the case, then it's really tacky looking. And the thing of it is that in the comics, Firestar was depicted with pupils and without pupils. So either one could have worked here, but this looks weird. And another thing I don't really like is her collar, because one, it should be sculpted on because it's a piece that separates the costume from her skin. And then the other reason I don't like it is because I initially couldn't see it. It blended in so well with the yellow that when I first looked at this figure, I didn't think it was there. Next up is Moon Knight, and this one is truly terrible. They didn't even try to get the details right on Moon Knight here. For one, when you look at the old comics with Moon Knight, he doesn't have red eyes, he has white eyes. And then his belt is all wrong too. It's not just a straight shot across his waist, it flares out as it goes behind him. And his gauntlets also aren't right. You look at this action figure, he just has gloves like you would see on Daredevil or any other character. But Moon Knight has ridges all over his gauntlets from the comics. And the last thing that really stuck out to me is that his right boot does not have a holster on it, because when you look at the old Moon Knight comics, guess what he has on his right boot? He has a holster on it, and it's got a weapon in it. Another kicker about this Moon Knight action figure is that he doesn't come with any accessories. And Moon Knight is the kind of character that you probably want to have those with, because he uses crescents that he throws, he uses a bow staff. Any of those would have made for fun things to have with him. But instead, as usual, they've gone the cheapest route they possibly could, and honestly, he looks like a bootleg. That's how cheap he looks. This is the kind of toy I would expect to see in some dollar store out in the middle of nowhere. Not from a professional company like Hasbro. This isn't even doing the bare minimum. Considering the newfound popularity of the character, it's a little shocking that they couldn't be bothered to put any of Moon Knight's details from the old comics on him, But here we are, and wow, no great surprise here, but when you look at Moon Knight's card, they changed the details on the drawing to match the action figure, even though it doesn't match what was present on the comics back in the day. And last is Amazing Fantasy 15 Spider-Man. This one is probably the best of the bunch. Is he necessarily one that you have to have? Probably not. Because if you already have Spider-Man from Series 1, or even Symbiote Spider-Man, you probably don't really need this Spider-Man. The only real difference between this Spider-Man and the old Spider-Man is that now he has a generic gripping hand that goes with every other character in this line instead of his thwipping hand. Something I've noticed about this one is that he's probably the closest in terms of body type to the original Steve Ditko Spider-Man, because Spider-Man in that comic was not a very muscular Spider-Man at all, and this body does feel more appropriate for him, although the mask doesn't look quite like the original Steve Ditko mask at all. In Amazing Fantasy 15, Spider-Man had more tightly clustered web lines on his mask, and his head was more even all the way down than it is presented here, with it being a little wider at the top. Of course, I know why it looks the way it does here. They're recycling the Spider-Man head again from the previous Spider-Man action figure. It is a nice touch that they included the webs under his arms. I am curious how well they stick, or if this Spider-Man can even move his arms. To be perfectly honest, those webs don't look all that secure, and I'm not sure how well they would stay on if I were to play with this action figure. Now that we've seen all these action figures, let's talk about what we'd like to see next. Personally, I would love to see some more villains in this line. There are not that many villains, and there's so many villains to choose from. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I would love to see a Dr. Octopus in this line. I'm really interested to see how they would handle the tentacles, and whether they would be fun to play with, but also I would love to see Dr. Doom. We gotta see a Dr. Doom sometime soon. I would not be opposed to a wave that was just all villains. I think that would be really cool. Bring on the bad guys, let's see them. Well, Soulmates, what do you think of this wave? Is this one that you want for your collection, or do you feel a little bit cool about this one like I do, and maybe you just aren't that interested because of the comparatively low quality? Let me know in the comments, guys. I would love to hear from you, and be sure to tell me what characters you want to see next. If you want to learn more about the last wave of these 3 3/4 inch Marvel Legends, you can check out my video about them here.